identity right now, me and Mike was talking about, I think we soft as hell, like as a team, internally. Like, you know what I mean? Like, not to the other team, but like internally, like we soft. Like, we can't talk to each other. Just a bunch of little kids. It's just like we playing with a bunch of little kids, like everybody, like the whole team. We just can't talk to each other, you know? And we gotta figure it out, man, because we can't go down this road.
So what do you do when you have one of the most successful seasons in franchise history, making your way all the way to the conference finals, upsetting the defending champions in the second round, while providing a matchup problem that really no team in the NBA can keep up with? Of course, you keep the core intact, make incremental improvements on a year-to-year basis, and try to compete at the highest level where you're already really close at. Unless you're the Minnesota Timberwolves, where you implode on yourself, blow it all to smithereens, and you somehow go from being one of the most interesting teams in the NBA to woefully disappointing early on in the year. During the offseason, easily the most interesting transaction was when Minnesota traded Karl-Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks, and in return received Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo. The biggest reason for this is because not only did the Timberwolves give away one of the most pivotal pieces to their franchise, and I would easily argue the biggest X factor in the postseason last year, but also it did beg the question on how much of their identity that they were going to lose in the process, and a lot of people were holding their breath because of some of the bad tendencies that we saw from Julius Randle throughout the years. And here we are now, 20 games into the regular season, and if you look at the top of the Western Conference, a team that was very prevalent at the top all year long is now towards the bottom with a 9-10 record. And things have gotten much worse in Minnesota over the past 10 games, where they've only been able to win 3. They went on a 4-game losing streak, and in particular within this 10-game sample size, offensively, the Timberwolves are at the bottom of the NBA. And it seemed as if like a lot of the frustration really boiled over in a game against the Toronto Raptors, where late in the outing, in a game in which they were supposed to win, Julius Randle just refused to pass the ball to Rudy Gobert in the post, which that clip went viral and really started to raise some eyebrows from a lot of people who probably have not been watching Timberwolves games very, very closely. However, I do want to say this to that clip because I do believe a lot of people are overblowing it way too much. Now, yes, Randle should have passed the ball to Gobert, and the body language between the two big men was really, really bad once Rudy picked up the 3 and a key violation, and it looked, again, really bad when they headed back on the other side of the floor. But in all honesty, this really isn't that big of a deal because Rudy Gobert's teammates not passing him the ball when he's perceived to be open or has a height advantage on a smaller defender happens pretty often because Gobert is out on the floor playing with oven mitts on his hands. Oven mitts. Gobert has some of the worst hands I've ever seen in my life. And when you couple that with bad footwork, terrible passing out of the post, and just athleticism and finishing that is practically non-existent, there are several times where Gobert's teammates, they just don't believe in him. They don't trust him enough to pass him the ball, even when he has a height advantage against a smaller defender. And this has been going on for years now, even back when he was in Utah, but it's certainly been much more prevalent over the past couple of seasons in Minnesota, with them being a team trying to compete at a very high level and more people tuning in to watch Anthony Edwards play. But again, I mean, this has been going on for quite some time. However, that doesn't absolve Randle of any blame. And if anything, a lot of the blame starts and stops when it comes to the addition of Julius Randle. Now, as I say this, and before I progress in this video, let me be clear. There are a lot of problems in Minnesota. The defensive impact with Rudy Gobert at the rim isn't the same. The intensity when it comes to defending high pick and rolls also isn't there like we saw last season. And overall, there's a lot of bad tendencies when it comes to this team. Players are lethargic, not giving a lot of effort, getting out rebounded pretty consistently, and so that's a team-wide issue that has to be addressed. But trading away Karl-Anthony Towns for Julius Randle is something that I just believe that this team will potentially never be able to recover from. And in all honesty, we kind of saw this from a mile away. In the first 9 games of the season, Randle actually looks pretty solid, in particular with his three-point shooting. He was really, really great knocking down the 3 ball. However, his shooting splits in the last 10 games have been egregious, and in particular with the long ball shot, it is practically evaporated, which in all honesty isn't a surprise. The one thing that is consistent about Julius Randle is his inconsistency, especially when it comes to his jump shot. And I do believe that asking Randle to be a 3-point shooter on this team really isn't the best fit for him. However, it is a necessity for a team that has a front court that not only features Julius Randle, but also Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels. And with McDaniels shooting sub 30% 40% from behind the arc, and Dante also struggling with his three-point shot early on, effectively we are talking about a team where they only have a handful of players in their rotation that can knock down the three-point shot on a consistent rate, one of which being Mike Conley, then you have Naz Reid, and of course Anthony Edwards. Now, I don't think I have to go into that much detail about how damning it can be for an average offensive unit last year to struggle on that side of the floor when you replace the best three-point shooter on the roster with someone who's mediocre in that aspect of basketball. The spacing alone is going to be egregiously bad. However, I think an overlooked aspect of the lack of spacing is how does it impact the rest of the teammates. We know Julius Randle inefficient, not going to be consistent, and what that means for his numbers and statistical profile, but what does this mean for everyone else? And this is where I believe that Anthony Edwards is being impacted the most. Early on this season, one of the side stories that's been going on with Ant is how many three-pointers he is attempting early on. He has ramped it up to double figures in his attempts, and a lot of people are split with this. On one hand, people are applauding Anthony Edwards. He is shooting well above 40% from behind the arc, which is a very steep progression in an aspect of his game that he struggled with early on in his career, which again should be applauded for. And shout out to Ant because this is something that he talked about, that he worked on all throughout the offseason, and that is great. But on the other side, there are a lot of people who are criticizing Anthony Edwards for this new style of play that he's adopting, in large part because it takes away from the other aspects of the game that is very, very valuable for what the Minnesota Timberwolves need out of him, in particular with his passing and playmaking. With Mike Conley getting older, Anthony Edwards really is the only ball handler on this team that can shift and manipulate defense with his ability to attack the basket, but he's not doing that as often because he's settling for a bunch of three-point shots. But the biggest reason why he's settling a lot more, in my opinion, has a lot to do with the fact that when he does attack the basket, the floor is immediately getting shrunk on him because he's playing alongside Julius Randle in a front court that again also features Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels. There have been several times in a year where it looks like Ant has the advantage, seems like he has a runway just for a player to rotate over, and he's kicking it out to Randle or McDaniels or trying to find a pass to dump it off to Rudy Gobert, which again, as we all know, offensively isn't the best outcome. And because of this, it seems as if like Ant's adjustment or his counter to this type of defensive scheme that he's seeing much more often is to just shoot more threes, because that's more than likely going to be the best way to put as much stress as possible on the defense, instead of trying to shift them at the basket, trying to shift them from the three-point line. But unfortunately, this does mean that Ant is resulting in not attacking the basket as often as he once was, with the fewest amount of shot attempts at the rim that we've seen of him since his rookie campaign, and also his worst finishing season throughout his entire career as well, which also results in him not getting to the free throw line as often either. And again, all of this is just a symptom of having another non-three-point shooter on the floor with Julius Randle. And all of this doesn't even talk about the really bad intangibles that Randle constantly displays when he's on the floor. The amount of possessions where we see from him where he is just a ball stopper, how lackadaisical and lazy he is when it comes to repositioning once a play breaks down, and even on the defensive side of the floor, the lack of detail and him just giving effort is so concerning, which really begs the question, how much better of a defensive player is he from Karl-Anthony Towns, which in my opinion at times I would go as far as to say he's actually worse than Towns in many of these outings early on. I mean, the bad intangibles and lack of effort is so obvious that even early on this season, Rui Hachimura talked about how the Lakers coaching staff made sure that he was prepped to know how to take advantage of it when they matched up against the Lakers, and Rui did such by crashing the boards. So if it's that identifiable where teams can scheme you out of the game and put Minnesota at a significant disadvantage, it's that much of a problem. But again, in all honesty, bro, this is not that crazy to believe at all. Quite frankly, a lot of this stuff has been predictable because when it comes to Julius Randle, he has a track record of this. Knicks fans tried to tell people of this. We saw this with the Pelicans as well, and even with his short time with the Lakers, I witnessed this as a fan pretty consistently. Personally, I wrote it off with him just being a young player trying to find his way and just being frustrated with the situation that he found himself in on a losing organization. But I mean, at this point, we have seen him with various different coaches, various different iterations of rosters, and now on a team that has a legit chance to compete at a very high level, and we're still receiving this type of effort from him. So at this point, he is who he is, which is really a shame because in my opinion, Minnesota was one of the most interesting teams last year, had a matchup problem that really and truly no team had a solution to. But now with this new CBA set in place, kind of forcing Minnesota to make a decision on if they want to continue to just be crippled with these penalties, fines, and restrictions that is being levied towards them as they creeped into the second tax apron, they were kind of forced to just make this decision, move off of the Karl-Anthony Towns contract that was going to consistently have them in the second tax apron for years to come, for Julius Randle, where more than likely they're going to unload him and just try to get more flexibility down the line, especially when it comes to re-upping on players such as Nickeil Walker-Alexander and Naz Reid, which, in all honesty, bro, this sucks. It really, really does suck. Last year, genuinely speaking, might have been the best iteration of Minnesota that we will probably see for the foreseeable future, especially with Rudy Gobert getting older, Mike Conley potentially not having a solution to replace him in the backcourt with Anthony Edwards, and with Julius Randle being now the new replacement for Karl-Anthony Towns, which may have addressed some of their financial concerns, but certainly brought together way more problems that I don't believe they have any true solutions for anytime soon. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Please let me know yours in the comment section below. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, notification bell to be updated when I upload on this channel. And if you missed my last video, it's right here. We talk about how Zion got bamboozled by his agency and isn't going to get paid as much money as he may have thought he was originally going to get paid. Make sure you go check it out.